The eviction letter trembled in my hands, but not from fear, from rage. My mother stood in the doorway of what used to be my childhood home, arms crossed, eyes cold as winter stone. 30 days, she said, like she was talking to a stranger. We need your room. My father didn't even have the decency to look at me. He just nodded from his recliner, the same recliner I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago when the old one finally gave out. The paper in my hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and maybe it did. It was heavy with 6 years of my life, 6 years of sacrifice, 6 years of pouring every cent I earned into keeping their house from being seized by the bank. I had given them everything, my savings, my dreams, my entire 20s, and this was my reward. An eviction notice from my own parents for the house I had paid for, the house that was supposed to be our family's future. The irony tasted like acid on my tongue. I wasn't just losing a bedroom. I was losing the last shred of belief I had that family meant something more than a transaction. If you're wondering how a daughter ends up holding an eviction notice signed by her own mother, I need to take you back 6 years. Back to when I still believed that sacrifice meant something. Back to when I thought love was unconditional. It started with a phone call that split my life into a before and after. I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in accounting, working my first real job at a mid-sized firm in Portland. I was making decent money for the first time in my life. Not rich by any means, but enough to finally breathe. Enough to start saving. I had this vision, you know? A little studio apartment of my own by 25. A used car that actually ran without sounding like it was dying. Maybe even a vacation somewhere warm. Simple dreams, but they were mine. Then my phone rang at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. It was my mom, and I could hear the tears before she even spoke. "Sweetheart," she choked out. "We need to talk. It's about your father." My stomach dropped. I thought someone had died. I thought there'd been an accident. But it was worse than that, in a way. It was slower. My father, Marcus, had been let go from his job. Not fired exactly. They called it downsizing, which is just a corporate word for "we don't need you anymore." He'd worked at the same manufacturing plant for 28 years. 28 years of loyalty, of overtime, of missing my school plays and soccer games because he was putting in extra shifts to give us a better life. And they let him go with 2 months severance and a handshake. At 57 years old, my father was suddenly unemployed in an economy that chews up older workers and spits them out. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time at a doctor's office doing administrative work, but her income barely covered groceries and utilities. The mortgage on their house, the house I grew up in, the house with the backyard where I learned to ride a bike, and the kitchen where my mom taught me to bake. That mortgage was $3,000 a month. For the first few weeks, they tried to handle it themselves. Dad applied to dozens of jobs. He was qualified, experienced, hardworking, but every application disappeared into the void. Every interview ended with "we'll let you know," and then silence. The rejection was eating him alive. I could hear it in our phone calls, the way his voice got quieter and quieter, how he stopped talking about the future and only talked about the past. The second phone call came 3 months later. This time it was my father, and I barely recognized his voice. The man who had always been strong, who had taught me to change a tire and balance a checkbook, who had walked me down the aisle at my best friend's wedding with his chest puffed out proud. That man was gone. In his place was someone broken. "Isabel," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "Baby girl, I don't know what to do." They were 4 months behind on the mortgage. 4 months. The bank had sent a notice of default. Foreclosure proceedings were starting. They had already drained their retirement accounts just trying to stay afloat, and there was nothing left. "We're going to lose the house," he whispered. "We're going to lose everything." I drove to Seattle that weekend, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The 3-hour drive felt like an eternity. When I walked through the front door, I knew immediately how bad it was. My mother had always kept the house immaculate. She took pride in it, in the gleaming counters and the fresh flowers on the table. But now, there were dishes piled in the sink, mail scattered everywhere. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills, like they might rearrange themselves into something manageable if he just looked hard enough. My mother hugged me, and she felt so small. When had she gotten so small? We sat down, and they laid it all out. The mortgage was $3,000 a month. Dad's unemployment barely covered their other bills. They'd applied for assistance, for loan modifications, for anything. But the bank was done being patient. They had 60 days, maybe less, before the house went to auction. "We don't have anyone else to turn to," my mother said, her hands shaking as she poured coffee none of us would drink. "Your sister." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My older sister, Vanessa, lived in California with her husband, a successful tech executive. They had a 4-bedroom house in San Francisco, 2 cars, a cleaning service. But Vanessa had always been clear about boundaries. "I have my own family to think about," she'd said more than once. She sent a card on birthdays and called on Christmas. That was the extent of her involvement. So that left me, 23-year-old me, with my entry-level job and my tiny apartment and my fragile little dreams. "We wouldn't ask if we had any other choice," my father said. And for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. "But you're good with money, Isabel. You always have been. And we thought maybe if you could help us with the mortgage," my mother cut in, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Just until your father finds work. We're family. This house is your inheritance, yours and Vanessa's. You'd be investing in your own future." That word, inheritance, they kept using it like a magic spell. Like if they said it enough times, it would transform my sacrifice into something noble and fair. But I knew, even then, somewhere deep down I knew, that inheritance is something you receive when someone dies, not something you're supposed to pay for while they're still alive. But when your parents are sitting in front of you, broken and terrified, when your mother is crying and your father can't meet your eyes because the shame is eating him alive, what do you say? How do you say no? I asked to see all the paperwork, the foreclosure notice, the mortgage statements, their bank accounts. I spent that entire weekend running numbers, building spreadsheets, looking for any other solution. But there wasn't one. They needed $3,000 a month, and they couldn't cover it. I could. Barely, but I could. "What if I move back home?" I said on Sunday night, before I drove back to Portland. "I'll take over the mortgage payments. You won't have to worry about the house." The relief on their faces was immediate and overwhelming. My mother actually sobbed. My father hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "You're saving us," he kept saying. "You're saving us." I gave notice at my apartment that week. I put my furniture in storage, the couch I'd saved up for, the kitchen table I'd found at a thrift store, and refinished myself. The bookshelf I'd built with my own hands. I packed my life into boxes and moved back into my childhood bedroom, the one with the faded purple walls and the window that looked out over the street where I used to wait for the school bus. I was 23 years old, and I had just voluntarily given up my independence. That first month, writing the check for $3,000 felt surreal. It was more than my rent had been. It was more than I'd ever spent on anything in my life. But I did it because they were my parents, and you help your parents. That's what family does. 1 month became 2. 2 became 6. 6 became a year. And somewhere along the way, the gratitude faded. The thank yous became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The mortgage payment stopped being a sacrifice and started being an expectation. I was no longer their daughter who was helping in a crisis. I was just the person who paid the mortgage. It was my job now, as routine and unremarkable as taking out the trash. The toll it took on my life was devastating, but it happened so slowly that I didn't notice until I was already drowning. Every month, that $3,000 disappeared from my account. But it wasn't just the mortgage, it was everything else too. The water heater died, and I paid for the replacement. The roof started leaking, and I paid the contractor. The property taxes came due, and somehow that became my responsibility too. I was working 50, sometimes 60 hours a week at my job just to keep up. I took on every extra project, every overtime opportunity. I couldn't afford to lose this job. My entire family's survival depended on my paycheck. The pressure was crushing. I'd wake up at night in a cold sweat, doing mental math, making sure I could cover everything. One mistake, one missed payment, and the whole house of cards would collapse. My personal life became a ghost of what it should have been. My friends from college were moving forward with their lives. They were traveling, getting promotions, falling in love, getting married. I watched it all happen through social media, through occasional coffee meetups where I'd smile and nod and pretend I was doing fine. But I wasn't fine. I was stuck. I couldn't date. How do you explain to someone that you're living with your parents at 25, at 26, that you have a good job but no money because you're supporting your entire family? The few times I tried, the relationships fizzled out quickly. One guy straight up said, "I don't want to get involved with someone who has that kind of financial burden." His honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. I couldn't travel. My friends planned a trip to Mexico for a wedding, and I had to say no. I couldn't afford the plane ticket, couldn't take the time off, couldn't risk anything that might jeopardize my ability to write that check on the first of the month. I watched the photos online, their sun-bright smiles and tropical drinks, and I felt like I was watching life happen to other people. People who weren't me. I couldn't save for my own future. The retirement account I'd started at my first job sat stagnant. I should have been building wealth, investing in my future, creating the life I wanted. Instead, every penny I earned went into maintaining my parents' life, the life they'd built, the life they couldn't afford. And then there was Vanessa, my sister, the golden child, the one who'd always done everything right. She'd married well, lived well, and kept a comfortable distance from our family's problems. But my parents didn't see it that way. When Vanessa sent them a fruit basket at Christmas, my mother would talk about it for weeks. "Isn't that thoughtful? Isn't she sweet?" When Vanessa and her husband took them out for dinner during their annual visit, one dinner once a year, my father would beam about what a success she'd become. Meanwhile, I was there every single day. I was paying their bills, fixing their house, keeping their lights on. And I got what? A casual "thanks, honey," if I was lucky? Most of the time, nothing at all. The mortgage payment was just expected. My presence was just expected. I was part of the furniture, as essential and as ignored as the refrigerator. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, from which city do you belong? So I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. The resentment built slowly, like water behind a dam. At first, it was small things. My mother asking me to pick up groceries on my way home from work. Not asking, really, just assuming I would. My father leaving the bills on the counter for me to handle because you're so much better at this stuff. The way they'd make plans without consulting me, because I'd always be there. I was reliable. I was dependable. I was a resource, not a person. Ending the text. I tried to talk to them about it once, about 2 years in. I waited till after dinner, when we were all sitting around the table. I brought it up gently, carefully. Ending the text. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," I said, my heart pounding. "I've been thinking about the future, about how long this arrangement can continue. I'm almost 26, and I need to start thinking about my own life, my own goals. Maybe we should start talking about an exit strategy, a way for you guys to take back over the mortgage, or..." My father cut me off, his face darkening. "An exit strategy? Isabel, we're still looking for work. The job market is terrible. You know this. I know, but it's been 2 years and we appreciate everything you're doing, my mother said, her voice sharp. We really do. But this house is part of your inheritance. You're not losing money. You're investing in your future. When we're gone, this will all be yours and Vanessa's. There it was again. Inheritance. The magic word that was supposed to make everything okay. But it didn't feel like an investment. It felt like I was being slowly drained, like they were taking pieces of me month by month, until there'd be nothing left. I didn't bring it up again. The years blurred together. 26 became 27, 27 became 28. I'd been paying the mortgage for 5 years, then 6. The number was staggering when I finally calculated it. $216,000. 6 years times 12 months times $3,000. $216,000 of my money, my youth, my dreams, all poured into a house that wasn't mine. And then, finally, the end came into sight. After 6 long years, I wrote the final mortgage payment. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the confirmation screen on my laptop. The balance? 0. The house was paid off, completely, free and clear. I felt nothing. I thought I'd feel relief, maybe even joy, but there was just this vast, echoing emptiness. 6 years. I was 29 years old, and I had spent my entire 20s paying for my parents' house. I walked downstairs that evening, where my parents were watching television in a living room. I tried to keep my voice light, casual. So, the last mortgage payment went through today, I said. The house is officially paid off. My father glanced up from the TV. Oh, good. Then he looked back at the screen. My mother nodded. That's nice, sweetie. Can you pick up milk tomorrow? We're running low. That was it. No celebration, no thank you, no acknowledgement of what I had just done, of what I had sacrificed. 6 years of my life. And I got the same response I'd get if I'd taken out the trash. I went back upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed in the dark. And for the first time in 6 years, I let myself really feel the anger I'd been pushing down, swallowing, ignoring. It rose up like a wave, hot and bitter and overwhelming. They didn't see me as their daughter anymore. They saw me as a function, a utility. I paid the bills. That's who I was to them now. The next 2 weeks were strange. The house felt different, like something was shifting beneath the surface. My parents were acting weird. Quiet, secretive. They'd stop talking when I entered a room. They spent a lot of time behind their closed bedroom door. Their voices low, murmurs I couldn't quite make out. I told myself I was being paranoid. They were probably just adjusting to not having the stress of the mortgage hanging over them. They'd relax soon, and things would get better. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a Thursday evening when they called me into the living room. My mother was perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. My father stood by the fireplace, his posture stiff. Everything about the scene screamed ambush, but I didn't see it coming. I was still operating under the delusion that I was their daughter, that they loved me, that the last 6 years meant something. Isabel, sit down, my father said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. His voice was formal, distant. It was the voice he used with telemarketers and door-to-door salesmen. I sat, my pulse quickening. What's going on? My mother reached into a folder on the coffee table and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table toward me. My name was printed on the front in cold, impersonal type. What is this? I asked, staring at it like it might bite me. It's a notice, my father said, still not looking at me. We're giving you 30 days to find your own place. The words didn't register at first. They sounded like a foreign language, like someone was speaking to me from underwater. 30 days? I repeated slowly. To find my own place? You're kicking me out? We're not kicking you out, my mother said, her voice clipped and defensive. We're helping you transition into independence. You're 29 years old, Isabel. It's time for you to have your own space. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. My own space? I just spent 6 years paying off your house. $216,000. That's my money in these walls. My father finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. And we housed you and fed you for 18 years before that. Consider the last 6 years back rent for your childhood. We're even. Back rent for my childhood. For being their daughter. The room started spinning. I couldn't breathe. You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? Some kind of sick joke? It's not a joke, my mother said, and her voice was like ice. We've made our decision. We need the space. Vanessa and Derek are having some financial difficulties. Financial difficulties? I choked out a hysterical laugh. Vanessa lives in $1 million house in San Francisco. Derek lost a significant investment, my father said sharply. They need to downsize for a while, and we're family. We help family. They're going to stay here until they get back on their feet. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Vanessa, the golden child who'd never contributed a dime to this house, who'd kept her comfortable distance while I bled myself dry. She was moving into my room, the room I'd lived in for 6 years while I paid their mortgage, and I was being thrown out to make space for her. You're replacing me, you whispered, with Vanessa. We're not replacing anyone, my mother snapped. Don't be dramatic. This is a practical decision. Vanessa needs help, and you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Stand on my own 2 feet? Stand on my own 2 feet? My voice was rising, shaking. I've been standing on my own 2 feet while holding up this entire family for 6 years. Where was Vanessa? Where was the golden child when you were about to lose everything? Your sister has her own life, my father said. She has a husband, responsibilities. You're single, you have flexibility. I'm single because I've spent 6 years trapped in this house paying your bills, living in my childhood bedroom. The tears were coming now, hot and furious. I gave up everything for you. My 20s, my savings, my future. Everything. And this is how you repay me? My mother stood up, her face tight with anger. We don't owe you anything, Isabel. You made the choice to help. Nobody forced you. And frankly, we've been more than patient with you living here rent-free. Rent-free. After $216,000. I stared at these 2 people, these strangers wearing my parents' faces, and something inside me just broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it crystallized. Maybe for the first time in 6 years, I saw them clearly. They had used me, completely, thoroughly used me. I was never their daughter in this arrangement. I was a convenience, a solution to a problem. And now that the problem was solved, I was disposable. Get out, my father said when I just sat there frozen. We need you out in 30 days. That's more than fair. I picked up the envelope, stood up, and walked out of the room without another word. Because what was there to say? What could I possibly say to people who saw their own child as a tenant whose lease had expired? The next 30 days were an exercise in emotional torture. I continued going to work, putting on a professional mask, but inside I was falling apart. At night, I'd come home to the house I'd saved, the house I'd paid for, and my parents would avoid me. We'd exist in the same space like ghosts, passing each other without speaking, without acknowledging the devastation between us. I started packing my room in stages, each box a fresh wound. My college diplomas, the ones my parents had framed with such pride when I graduated, into a box. The photo albums from family vacations, back when we were actually a family, into a box. the childhood stuffed animals I'd kept for sentimental reasons, into a box. Every item was a memory turning sour, a piece of evidence that the love I thought was unconditional had always been transactional. About 2 weeks in, Vanessa called me. I almost didn't answer, but morbid curiosity won out. "Izzy!" Her voice was bright, cheerful, completely oblivious. "Mom told me you're finally getting your own place. I'm so excited for you. This is such a big step." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, unable to speak. Did she really not know, or did she just not care? "Derek and I really appreciate Mom and Dad letting us stay for a bit," she continued, filling my silence with her chatter. "The market's been rough, and we need to recalibrate our finances. It's so nice to have family to fall back on, you know?" "Vanessa," I finally said, my voice flat. "Do you know why I'm moving out?" A pause. "Because you're ready to be independent?" "No, because Mom and Dad are kicking me out to make room for you." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, well, I'm sure they have their reasons. You know how Mom is about space." Mom is about space. Not "that's terrible," or "I didn't know," or "let me help." Just casual dismissal, because my pain wasn't her problem. It never had been. "Vanessa, I've been paying their mortgage for 6 years. $216,000. Did you know that?" I knew you were helping them, but I wasn't helping. I was supporting them, completely, while you were living your life in California. And now they're kicking me out the moment the house is paid off, so you can move in. Don't you see how insane that is? Period, pause, exclamation mark. "Izzy, you're being dramatic. I'm sure that's not how it is. Mom and Dad love you. They're probably just trying to encourage you to be independent. And honestly, it's kind of weird that you've been living with them this long. You're almost 30. So I hung up on her. There was nothing else to say. My entire family had shown me exactly who they were, and I finally had the clarity to see it. Period, pause. I needed help, and I had nowhere to turn. My friends were sympathetic, but they had their own lives, their own problems. I crashed on a few couches, stored my belongings in a friend's garage. I felt homeless in a way that wasn't about physical shelter. I was emotionally homeless. The people who were supposed to be my foundation had pulled the rug out from under me, and I was free falling. That's when the anger really set in. Not the hot, chaotic anger of those first few days, but cold, calculated fury. I'm an accountant. Numbers are my language, and I speak it fluently, so I started doing what I do best. I organized the data. I pulled together every bank statement from the last 6 years. Every mortgage payment, every repair bill, every property tax payment. I documented everything with receipts, confirmations, and canceled checks. The spreadsheet I created was meticulous, color-coded, airtight. $216,000 in mortgage payments, $38,000 in home repairs and maintenance, $15,000 in property taxes and insurance. Grand total, $269,000. Almost $300,000 that I had poured into a house I didn't own, for people who had discarded me without a second thought. I made an appointment with a lawyer specializing in family law and property disputes. Her name was Jennifer Huang, and she came highly recommended. Her office was sleek and professional, and when I walked in with my folder of documentation, she could probably see the desperation and rage radiating off me. "Tell me everything," she said, leaning back in her chair. So I did. I laid out the entire story, from the first panicked phone call to the eviction notice. I showed her my spreadsheets, my receipts, my documentation. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment, studying the papers. "This is a difficult situation," she finally said. "Legally, without your name on the deed or a formal loan agreement in writing, your mortgage payments are considered gifts. You'd have a very hard time recouping that money through the courts." My heart sank. "So there's nothing I can do? They just get to keep everything?" I didn't say that. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Tell me about any other financial entanglements. Credit cards, loans, anything with your name on it tied to the property. I thought back, racking my brain. Wait, there's a home equity line of credit. They took it out about 7 years ago, when my dad's credit was terrible after he lost his job. The bank required a cosigner. I signed on to help them get approved. Jennifer's expression shifted. You co-signed on a HELOC secured by the property? Do you know if it's still active? I don't know. I haven't thought about it in years. Find out, she said. If that line of credit is still open and your name is still on it, that could be your leverage. You're legally tied to that property through the HELOC, and if they've been irresponsible with payments, your credit is on the line too. I left her office with a mission. That night, I logged into my credit monitoring account for the first time in months. And there it was, the HELOC, still active, with a balance of $42,000. My name was on it, and according to the payment history, they'd been making minimum payments, if that. Some months they'd missed payments entirely. They'd been destroying my credit while I was living in their house, paying their mortgage, keeping them afloat. The betrayal was so complete, it almost felt poetic. I called Jennifer immediately. It's still active. $42,000 balance, and the payment history is terrible. Perfect, she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Here's what we're going to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would pay off the entire HELOC balance to protect my credit. Simultaneously, Jennifer would file a lien against the property for the full amount I'd paid. The mortgage payments, the repairs, everything. The lien would be a legal claim against the house, meaning they couldn't sell or refinance without paying me back first. And given their financial situation, they'd have no choice but to sell. They'll lose the house? I asked. They'll have to sell it to pay off your lien, but they'll walk away with whatever equity is left over after your claim is satisfied. They won't be homeless, but they also won't get to keep the house you paid for. It was perfect. It was justice. And it was completely legal. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, from which city do you belong? So I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. I moved out on day 30. My parents made sure to be gone when I left, avoiding any final confrontation. I walked through the house one last time, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't my home. It had never been my home. It was the place where I'd lost 6 years of my life to people who saw me as a resource, not a daughter. I left my key on the kitchen counter, next to a note that just said, "Goodbye." I didn't say thank you. I didn't say I love you. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. I lived with my friend Rachel for 2 months while I got back on my feet. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that surprised my colleagues. All that pain, all that rage, I channeled it into rebuilding my life. I opened new bank accounts at a different bank. I started contributing to my retirement fund again. I bought new clothes that actually fit and weren't 5 years old. Small things, but they mattered. They were mine. I followed Jennifer's advice about no contact. I blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked Vanessa. I unfollowed them on social media. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd return the favor. For the first time in 6 years, I focused entirely on myself, my needs, my goals, my future. It felt selfish at first, almost guilty, but then I remembered they'd been selfish with my life for 6 years. I was just balancing the scales. 8 weeks after I moved out, I got the confirmation that the HELOC was paid off. $42,000, wired from my carefully rebuilt savings. It hurt to spend that money, but it was an investment. Jennifer filed the lien the same day. $269,000 legally attached to the property. The county recorder stamped it and filed it. It was public record now. Official. I waited, and I didn't have to wait long. The first call came 3 days later. It was my father, his number showing up as unknown because I'd blocked him. I let it go to voicemail. His message was clipped and angry. "Isabel, it's your father. We need to talk. The bank sent us something about a lien on the house. I don't know what you're playing at, but you need to call me back immediately." Delete. 2 days after that, my mother called from a different number. I let that one go to voicemail too. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, all the coldness from our last conversation gone. "There's been some kind of mistake with the house paperwork. Can you please call us back? We can work this out. We're family." Family. Now I was family again, now that they needed something from me. Delete. Then came the text messages from Vanessa, increasingly frantic. "Izzy, what did you do? Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying you put a lien on the house? That can't be true. Isabel, you need to fix this. They could lose everything. How can you be so selfish after everything they've done for you?" After everything they'd done for me, the irony was so thick I could choke on it. I didn't respond to any of them. I kept my head down, went to work, went home to Rachel's couch, and waited. Jennifer had warned me they'd panic once they understood what the lien meant. "They'll try to guilt you," she said. "They'll try to manipulate you. They'll say you're destroying the family. Stay strong. You have every legal right to do this." 3 weeks after the lien was filed, I got an email from my father. It was long, rambling, full of accusations and guilt trips. He called me ungrateful. He said I was tearing the family apart. He brought up every sacrifice they'd made for me as a child, every Christmas present, every birthday party, as if those things somehow obligated me to bankrupt myself for them in adulthood. But buried in the anger was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. "We have no choice but to put the house on the market. I hope you're happy." I was. The for sale sign went up 2 weeks later. I didn't drive by to see it. I didn't need to. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it to me casually, and I just nodded, keeping my face neutral. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: satisfaction. The house sold in 40 days. It was a hot market, and the place was well maintained, thanks to all the money I'd poured into it. Jennifer handled all the legal proceedings. The escrow company followed the law exactly. The first priority was the lien. My $269,000 came out of the sale proceeds before my parents saw a penny. When it was all done, Jennifer called me with the final numbers. The house sold for $580,000. After the lien, closing costs, and realtor fees, your parents walked away with about $240,000. That's their share. $240,000. Less than I'd paid into the house, but still a significant amount. They weren't homeless. They weren't destitute. They had options. They just didn't have the house I bought for them, and they couldn't stand it. The day the money hit my account, I stood in my new studio apartment, my first real apartment in 6 years, and looked at the bank app on my phone. $269,000. My money returned to me. It felt like vindication, but it also felt bittersweet. I'd won, but the cost was my entire family. I thought about my mother's face the day she handed me the eviction notice. The coldness in her eyes. The dismissive way she'd said, "back rent." I thought about my father's voice when he said, "We don't owe you anything." I thought about Vanessa's obliviousness, her selfish disregard for what I'd been through. And I realized I hadn't lost my family. You can't lose something you never really had. What I'd lost was the illusion of family. And maybe that was the most valuable thing I could have lost. With my reclaimed money, I started building the life I should have been living all along. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland with huge windows and exposed brick. It was trendy and modern and completely mine. I bought furniture, new furniture, not hand-me-downs or thrift store finds. A real couch, a dining table, a bed frame that didn't squeak. Simple things. But they represented freedom. I started investing aggressively. I opened a brokerage account and started building a diversified portfolio. I maxed out my retirement contributions for the first time in years. I even hired a financial advisor to help me plan for long-term wealth building. Every smart financial decision felt like an act of rebellion against the years I'd wasted. And I started dating again. Really dating, not the half-hearted attempts I'd made while living under my parents' roof. I went out with people I met through friends, through work, through dating apps. Some of them went nowhere, but a few turned into something real. For the first time, I could be honest about my life, my goals, my situation. I wasn't the woman who lived with her parents anymore. I was just me. 6 months after the house sold, I went on a date with a man named Colin. He was an architect, funny and kind, with an easy smile that made me feel comfortable. We met for coffee, and the conversation flowed naturally. When he asked about my family, I was honest in a way I'd never been before. "It's complicated," I said. "We're not in contact right now." There was a falling out over money and boundaries. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That must have been really hard. But it also sounds like you did what you needed to do for yourself." It was such a simple concept, but it felt revolutionary. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of guilt, the constant voice in my head telling me I should have done more, sacrificed more, been more. It was hard, I admitted, but it was also necessary. Colin reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, for what it's worth, I think standing up for yourself takes a lot of courage." Equals Forsage. That date turned into a second, then a third. Colin became my boyfriend, then my partner. He knew my whole story, the money, the betrayal, the lien, everything. And he didn't run. He didn't judge. He just accepted that I'd been through something difficult and had come out stronger on the other side. About a year after the house sold, I got an unexpected message on LinkedIn. It was from Vanessa. I stared at the notification for a long time before opening it. "Izzy, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to reach out. Derek and I are separated. Living with Mom and Dad was a disaster. They expected us to help with their rent, and when we couldn't, things got really toxic. I finally understand what you must have gone through. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. If you're ever willing to talk, I'd like to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. I miss my sister." I read it 3 times, and then I closed the app without responding. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, Vanessa had genuinely changed, that she'd learned something from her own experience with our parents. But a bigger part of me knew the truth. People don't change that easily. And even if she had changed, I didn't owe her forgiveness. I didn't owe her a relationship. I'd spent 6 years giving everything to people who took and never gave back. I wasn't going to fall into that trap again. 2 years after I moved out, my life was unrecognizable from what it had been. I got promoted to senior accountant at my firm with a significant salary increase. Colin and I moved in together into a beautiful 2-bedroom condo that we bought together, both our names on the deed. We adopted a rescue dog named Pepper, a scrappy little terrier mix who'd been through her own share of abandonment and came out the other side. I saw a lot of myself in her. My investment portfolio was growing steadily. I had real savings again, real financial security. I took a vacation to Italy with Colin, something I'd dreamed about doing since college, but never thought I'd be able to afford. We spent 2 weeks wandering through Florence and Rome, eating too much pasta, drinking wine in tiny cafes. It was perfect. It was mine. But the shadow of my family still lingered in unexpected ways. I'd see a mother and daughter shopping together, laughing, and I'd feel a pang of loss, not for who my parents were, but for who I'd wanted them to be, for the fantasy family I'd built in my head, the one that appreciated sacrifice and valued me as more than a dollar ATM machine with a heartbeat. Therapy helped. I started seeing a counselor named Dr. Morrison about 18 months after I left. At first, I resisted. I told myself I was fine, that I'd moved on, that I didn't need to process anything. But Colin gently encouraged me to talk to someone. And I finally caved. Dr. Morrison was kind, but direct. She didn't let me minimize what had happened. "What your parents did was financial abuse," she said in one of our early sessions. "They exploited your love and your sense of duty. That's not a small thing, Isabel. That's trauma." Trauma. The word felt too big, too serious. Trauma was for people who'd been through real horrors, not for someone who just had difficult parents. But the more I talked about it, the more I realized she was right. I'd been conditioned to put their needs above my own, to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort, to accept less than I deserved because that's what family does. Breaking that conditioning was hard work. It meant recognizing all the ways I'd been taught that my value was in what I could provide, not who I was. It meant learning to say no without guilt. It meant accepting that love shouldn't hurt and family shouldn't cost you your future. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" Dr. Morrison asked me during one session. I thought about it for a long time. "I don't know," I finally said. "Part of me wants to believe they could change, that they could apologize and mean it. But a bigger part of me thinks that would require them to see me as a person, not a resource, and I don't think they're capable of that." "And how does that make you feel?" "Sad," I admitted. "Not for what I lost, but for what I never really had. I spent my whole life believing that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved myself enough, they'd see me, they'd value me. But it was never about me. It was always about what I could do for them." Dr. Morrison nodded. "Grief for the family you deserved is completely valid. You're allowed to mourn that loss, even as you move forward." So I did mourn. I mourned the mother who should have protected me instead of exploiting me. I mourned the father who should have been proud of me instead of dismissive. I mourned the sister who should have stood beside me instead of benefiting from my downfall. And I mourned the years I'd lost, the opportunities I'd missed, the version of myself I might have been if I'd been free to grow. But I also celebrated. I celebrated my strength, my resilience, my ability to rebuild from nothing. I celebrated the life I'd created, the genuine relationships I'd formed, the future I was building on my own terms. About 3 years after the house sold, I got a letter in the mail. It was forwarded from my old address, and the return address was my parents' current apartment. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it or just throw it away. Finally, curiosity won. I opened it. A letter was from my mother, handwritten on lined notepaper. Her handwriting was shaky, less precise than I remembered. "Dear Isabel, your father and I have been talking, and we wanted to reach out. We know things ended badly between us, and we've had a lot of time to think about it. We may have been too harsh when we asked you to leave. We were going through a difficult time, making difficult decisions, and we didn't handle it well. Vanessa has told us about the lien and the money you took from the house sale. We understand you were upset, but we think you overreacted. That money was part of your inheritance anyway. You just took it a little early. We're writing because we think it's time to move past this. We're your parents, and you're our daughter, and family should be able to forgive. We'd like to get together for lunch or dinner sometime, just to talk. We can put all of this behind us and start fresh. Let us know when you're available. We miss you. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it twice, then set it down on my kitchen table. Colin was making dinner, and he glanced over at me. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Letter from my parents," I said, my voice neutral. He came over, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Do you want to talk about it?" I looked down at the letter again. at the careful words that almost sounded like an apology but weren't, at the accusation buried in the kindness. You overreacted. At the complete lack of understanding about what they'd done, the complete absence of genuine remorse. They want to have lunch, I said. To move past this and start fresh. What do you want to do? Colin asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. What would having a relationship with them look like? Would they respect my boundaries? Would they treat me differently? Or would we just fall back into the same patterns where I gave and they took, where my needs came last? And then I thought about the life I'd built without them, the peace I'd found, the self-respect I'd developed, the freedom I'd earned. I don't want to go to lunch, I said finally. I don't want to start fresh. Starting fresh means pretending the past didn't happen, and I'm not willing to do that. Do you want to respond to them? Colin asked gently. I considered it. Part of me wanted to write back and explain, one more time, exactly how much they'd hurt me. But I'd done that already, in 1,000 different ways. They hadn't listened then. They wouldn't listen now. No, I said. I don't think I will. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and threw it away. It felt good. It felt final. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, from which city do you belong? So I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. That decision, to not respond, to not engage, to protect my peace, was one of the best I ever made. Because once I stopped hoping they'd change, once I stopped waiting for the apology I'd never get, I was free. Really, truly free. Life moved forward. Colin and I got engaged on a trip to the coast. A simple proposal on a windswept beach at sunset. We started planning a small wedding, just close friends, the family we'd chosen rather than the family we'd been born into. My maid of honor was Rachel, the friend who'd let me crash on her couch when I had nowhere else to go. The people standing beside me would be there because they wanted to be, not because they were obligated. I thought about sending an invitation to my parents, to Vanessa. The traditional part of me said I should, that they'd expect it, that it might cause more problems if I didn't. But the part of me that had learned to value myself said no. This day was about celebrating love, commitment, and partnership. It was about surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared about my happiness. My family had proven they didn't qualify, so I didn't send invitations. And on my wedding day, as I stood beside Colin in a garden full of wildflowers, surrounded by people who loved and supported me, I didn't feel their absence as a loss. I felt it as a choice I'd made to prioritize my happiness, my peace, my future. During the reception, Rachel gave a toast that made me cry. Izzy is one of the strongest people I know, she said, her voice thick with emotion. She's been through things that would have broken a lot of people. But instead of becoming bitter, she became better. Instead of closing her heart, she opened it to real, genuine love. And that takes incredible courage. As everyone raised their glasses, I realized that's what I'd done. I'd taken the pain and betrayal and anger, and I'd transformed it. Not by forgetting, but by refusing to let it define me. Not by forgiving people who didn't deserve it, but by forgiving myself for believing them when they said they loved me. 5 years after I moved out, I was sitting in my home office, the spare bedroom in the condo Colin and I owned, working on a client's accounts, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Hello? The voice was shaky, older than I remembered. It was my mother. Please don't hang up. My finger hovered over the end call button. How did you get this number? I asked. I called your old work. They transferred me. Please, I just need to talk to you for a minute. I should have hung up. Every instinct told me to protect myself, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. But curiosity, or maybe some lingering shred of hope I couldn't quite kill, made me stay on the line. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She took a shaky breath. "Your father is sick. Cancer, stage 4. The doctors say he has maybe 6 months." I felt nothing. Not sadness, not relief, nothing. Just emptiness. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is that all you have to say?" Her voice rose, anger bleeding through. "He's dying, Isabel. Your father is dying, and you don't care?" "What do you want from me, Mom? Do you want me to say I'll come visit? That I'll drop everything and rush to his bedside after he kicked me out of the house I paid for?" "He's your father," she said, her voice breaking. "Regardless of what happened, he's your father. Don't you think you owe him?" "I don't owe him anything." I cut her off, the words sharp and final. "I paid my debts, $269,000. I paid everything I owed and then some. You both made it very clear that our relationship was transactional. Well, the transaction is complete. We're even." "How can you be so cold?" she whispered. "What happened to you?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "What happened to me? You happened to me. You and Dad happened to me. You taught me that love has a price tag and family is just a contract. Well, congratulations, the lesson stuck." "Please," she said, and now she was crying. "Please, Isabel, he wants to see you. He wants to apologize. He knows we made mistakes." "Mistakes?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Kicking me out after I saved your house wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Telling me my 6 years of sacrifice was back rent wasn't a mistake. It was cruelty. And now that he's dying, now that he wants to clear his conscience, I'm supposed to forgive all of that? I'm supposed to come running back and give him peace?" "He's your father," she repeated, but weaker now. "He stopped being my father the day he handed me that eviction notice," I said quietly. "I'm sorry he's sick. I genuinely am. But I can't give him what he wants. I can't absolve him. Some things can't be fixed with a deathbed apology." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Colin appeared in the doorway, concern written all over his face. "That was your mom?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He came over and wrapped his arms around me, and I let myself lean into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "My dad is dying," I finally said. "Cancer." "I'm sorry," he murmured against my hair. "I'm not going to see him," I said, needing to say it out loud. "Is that terrible? Does that make me a terrible person?" Colin pulled back and looked at me, his eyes serious. "You're not a terrible person. You're someone who knows their limits and protects their peace. That's not cruel. That's survival." I thought about my father. I tried to summon up memories of who he'd been before everything fell apart. The dad who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with my math homework, who walked me to school on my first day of kindergarten. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life, someone else's father. The man who'd let me go without a fight, who'd chosen convenience over his daughter, who'd watched me leave without even a goodbye. That was the man I really knew. "I don't owe him forgiveness," I said, more to myself than to Colin. "I don't owe him peace of mind." "No," Colin agreed. "You don't." My father died 3 months later. I found out through a mutual acquaintance who reached out tentatively, probably expecting me to fall apart. But I didn't. I felt sad in an abstract way, the way you feel sad when you hear about any tragedy. But I didn't feel the grief that children are supposed to feel when they lose a parent. Maybe I'd already grieved him years ago, when he stopped being my father and became my landlord. I didn't go to the funeral. Vanessa sent me a long, angry email calling me heartless, selfish, unforgivable. She said I'd regret it for the rest of my life, that I'd dishonored his memory, that I was a disgrace to the family. I read it once and deleted it without responding. Dr. Morrison and I talked about it in therapy. "Do you feel guilty?" she asked. Sometimes, I admitted, society says I should have gone, that I should have risen above it and been the bigger person. But I also know that going would have been for them, not for me. It would have been one more sacrifice on the altar of family obligation, and I'm done sacrificing for people who never valued it. That's very self-aware, she said. The guilt you're feeling? That's the result of years of conditioning. But feelings aren't facts. You can feel guilty and still know you made the right choice. She was right. I did feel guilty sometimes, in the quiet moments late at night, but I never regretted my decision. Not once. Life continued. Colin and I celebrated our 3rd anniversary. I got promoted to partner at my firm. We bought a bigger house, one with a yard for Pepper and room for the family we were talking about starting. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, built a life that was rich and full and entirely my own. 7 years after I moved out of my parents' house, I was at a coffee shop, working on my laptop, when someone tapped my shoulder. I looked up, and there was Vanessa. She looked older, tired. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray she hadn't bothered to cover. She was carrying a coffee cup, and her hands trembled slightly. "Izzy," she said, "can I sit?" Every instinct told me to say no, to close my laptop and leave. But something, curiosity maybe, or a desire for closure, made me gesture to the empty chair across from me. She sat down, clutching her coffee like a lifeline. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. "I'm not here to attack you," she finally said, "or to try to guilt you into anything. I wanted to talk, if you're willing." "I'm listening," I said, echoing the words I'd said to my mother years ago. Vanessa took a deep breath. "Mom is struggling. Financially, emotionally. She's alone now, and the life insurance wasn't as much as they thought. She's barely making ends meet." "And you want me to help her," I said flatly. "No," Vanessa said quickly. "Actually, no. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling you because I thought you should know." I waited. There was more. I could see it in her face. "Derek and I split up for good," she continued. "The separation became permanent. Living with Mom and Dad was a nightmare. You were right about that. They expected us to pay for everything, to take care of them, and when we couldn't, they turned on us the same way they turned on you." "So now you understand," I said, and I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. "Yes," she said simply, "now I understand. And I owe you an apology. A real one, not like the LinkedIn message I sent. Izzy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry I was oblivious to what you were going through. I'm sorry I benefited from your sacrifice without acknowledging it. And I'm sorry I judged you when you protected yourself." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, of a hidden agenda. But all I saw was genuine regret. "Thank you," I said carefully. "That means something, but it doesn't change what happened." "I know," Vanessa said. "I'm not asking for us to go back to how things were. I don't even know if that's possible. I just wanted you to hear that I see it now. I see what they did to you. What we all did to you." We talked for another hour. It was stilted at first, awkward, but gradually became easier. She told me about her divorce, her new job, her therapy. I told her about my life, my work, my marriage. We didn't make promises or plans. We just talked. Two women who used to be sisters, finding their way through the wreckage of a family that had imploded. When we finally parted ways, Vanessa hugged me. It was brief, tentative, but genuine. "I hope you're happy," she said. "Really happy. You deserve that." "I am," I said. And I meant it. Vanessa and I didn't become close after that. We sent the occasional text, met for coffee every few months. We were cordial, even friendly, but there was a distance that would probably never fully close. Too much had happened. Too many wounds had been left to scar. But I appreciated her apology, not because it changed the past, but because it validated my experience. It confirmed that I wasn't crazy, wasn't oversensitive, wasn't wrong to protect myself. The family I'd grown up in had been toxic, and walking away had been the healthiest thing I could do. And now, At 36 years old, I look back on those 6 years in my parents' house, and I see them clearly. Not through the lens of guilt or obligation, but through the lens of truth. I was exploited. My love and loyalty were weaponized against me. I gave everything, and it was never going to be enough. But I also see what I gained. I learned my worth. I learned that I'm capable of surviving things I thought would destroy me. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, even when everyone tells you you should stay. I learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, by love that doesn't come with conditions, by people who see you as more than what you can provide for them. Colin and I are trying for a baby now. We talk about what kind of parents we want to be, what kind of family we want to create. And I know, with absolute certainty, that I will never make my child feel the way my parents made me feel. I will never take their sacrifice for granted. I will never see them as a resource instead of a person. My child will know they're loved unconditionally, not because of what they can do for me, but because they exist, because they're mine. That's the family I'm building, the family I never had but always deserved. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never moved back home. If I'd said no that first night when my parents asked for help, would I have more money? Probably. Would I have traveled more, achieved more, built my career faster? Maybe. But I also wouldn't have learned the lessons I needed to learn. I wouldn't have developed the strength I needed to have. I wouldn't have discovered who I really am when everything else is stripped away. The house I paid for is owned by someone else now. A young family bought it after my parents sold it. I drove by once, about a year ago, just out of curiosity. There were toys in the yard, a swing set in the back. The new owners had painted the shutters blue. It looked happy. It looked like a home. And I realized I didn't feel anything when I looked at it. No anger, no grief, no longing. It was just a house. The money I poured into it was returned to me. The emotional investment I made was a loss I'd written off. It was in the past, and I'd made my peace with it. My home is with Colin now, in the house we bought together, with both our names on the deed. My home is in the life we're building, the family we're creating. My home is in knowing my worth and refusing to settle for less than I deserve. So was I too harsh? Should I have forgiven them? Reconciled? Been the bigger person? Those are questions I've asked myself 1,000 times. And here's my answer. I chose myself. After 6 years of choosing them, of putting their needs above my own, of sacrificing my future for their present, I finally chose myself. And I'm not sorry for that. Not even a little bit. What would you have done in my situation? Was I justified in walking away and taking back what was mine? Or should I have tried harder to maintain the relationship, even after everything that happened? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has, please share it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is let others know they're not alone. So let's talk about it. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, from which city do you belong? So I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Strong am I? Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, you are worth more than what you can provide. Your value isn't in your sacrifice. You deserve love that doesn't cost you everything you are. Strong M, take care of yourselves. Choose yourselves. You're worth it. Strong M, choose yourselves.